Today's conversation is about caring for our aging parents. Most of us have come to the point in our life, probably all of us, where at least the roles are beginning to reverse. I've done this already, and I wish I knew then what I know now. I was so scared of so much of it. I was so afraid to ask for help. So in this conversation, I've reached out to two experts from the Motion Picture and Television Fund to help guide us through when the appropriate time to step in is, how to do it kindly and filled with compassion, what paperwork you're going to need, what to look for if you're moving your parents, when to ask for help. Everything that we need to make this part of our aging journey easier. Most importantly, I want you to know that if I could do it, you can do it. I promise you'll get through this.
Hey baby, it's time for the NIKKI ALPERT Podcast. Come on, pull up a chair. We gonna have some fun.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the NIKKI ALPERT Podcast. My special guests are from the Motion Picture and Television Home. I'm talking to the President and CEO, Bob Beitcher. Hi Bob.
Hi, Nikki.
And this is Jessica Caughey. And Jessica is the Director of Campus and Community-Based Social Services. The reason I'm asking them to talk to us today is because most of us are dealing with aging parents. And that conversation, maybe you should stop driving, maybe you've got to move out, what are we going to do? Do you have plans for your death? It's such an awkward and difficult conversation for so many to have. Jessica and Bob are experts on how to prepare for this time in our lives in taking care of our parents. So, Bob, let's start with you. Is it ever too soon? But if you're too afraid, when do you do this?
I think a lot of our answers are going to say, or are going to start with, it depends. But, I would say to you, it's never too soon. And I think that applies for us as well as for our parents. We should start having these conversations with our kids and, with our parents as early as possible, because you just never know. You'd like to think, next Saturday, we're going to sit down with dad and have this leisurely conversation. And next Thursday, God forbid, you get a call saying dad is, unconscious in the ER, and you just don't know a lot about what his preferences would be.
Sure.
So I think you can never start it too early. Yes, it's completely awkward. I have 4 kids. The oldest is 38. And every time I try to have this conversation with them, they freeze, they hold their ears.
I remember
that. They don't want to think that their father and mother are ever going to get older and need any of this, or that they're going to be in a position to have to manage or make these, help us make these choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's never too early to do it. I know Jessica will say this as well. You really should have a plan in place, that's documented and signed off. And, that's pretty granular.
Right.
I have used 5 questions from UCLA, which I think is a really good document, but there are lots of other documents that you can use to put all of that stuff in order.
When we're talking about getting things in order, there are so many things.
Right.
So what do you say when I come to you and say, what do I need to do?
Right. Well, I think just to sort of piggyback a little bit about what Bob was saying about initiating the conversation, because I know that's always hard for people to do, and perhaps you experienced that, Nikki, with your own parents, is to remind people that everyone wants to be in control of their life, right? Like we all want to be the captains of our ship. And so as adult children trying to talk to our parents about this, reminding them that, you're coming from a place to help your parents remain the captains of their ship.
Nice.
And to have those conversations within that context. So when you're approaching mom and dad, it's not about me, the child, taking over for you,
right,
but it's about me, the child, preserving your control in the way you want your story to be written through the end of your life, and allowing them that independence and that control. So I think trying to help people frame that is crucial, because I think what you're talking about, and perhaps what you experienced and what Bob mentioned, is kids freak out. They don't want to think about these things. It's scary for them. It's scary for their parents. But I think if you can sort of kind of reframe it as a sense of control.
I want you to know that before you got on the line, Bob said that I would adore you. And just that alone, because they do feel like they're being stripped of the control. And I love the way you say that. The captain of their own ship. I think it's great. So, okay.
Nikki, and let me just interject for a second, because, I think everyone's relationship with their parents is different.
Sure.
And most of us know our parents well enough to know their strengths and their weaknesses, their hot buttons. From a very early age, we know how to, we figure out how to get them to say yes to even to things that they shouldn't be. So we've got a lot of training with our parents in how to influence them. And I think, this is the time, I don't want to sound cynical about it, but this is really the time to get all the tools out of the shed and figure out, what's the best approach to mom and dad that isn't going to, incite some negative response.
Make them defensive.
Make them defensive. And, just the beginning of that conversation is just different for everyone and their parents.
Yeah.
And whether it's, saying, remember what happened to Aunt, Susie, blah, blah, blah. Gee, I'd never want that to happen to you. There are just different ways of just getting into that conversation that you need to be very thoughtful about it. You can't just oh shit, dad's driving is terrible. Let me just, ambush him, in the moment and say, oh my God, I'm never getting in a car with you. You're the worst driver ever. Give me your license. It's getting to yes just has lots of
possibilities.
Possibilities.
Sometimes manipulative. I remember, do you remember my father had that red convertible? And he, you guys, was the worst driver in the world. He would drive practically on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I tried to get him to go to his license. They didn't test anything except for his vision.
Yeah.
And finally I called his doctors. I was like, you've got to take the car away. Well, we can't do that. And I was like, ugh. Then she said, I think he's fine. I talk to him all the time. I'm like, great, let him drive you home today. And that wasn't going to happen. So then I asked if she could write a letter to the DMV requesting that he came in for a test. And then I didn't have to say anything. He just lost it. He wouldn't go because he knew he wouldn't pass the test.
Yeah.
And then it was over. So that's Bob was saying there are many ways. That might be the very manipulative child's way, but it works. And I'm just offering that to you guys in case it helps.
Yeah, it works. It works often.
Oh, okay. So I'm not the only one.
Right. It's a good trick to know, though, for sure.
Right. Okay. So I'm not the expert and you are. So if I were to come there and everything were to work out, your place is different than most places, as everybody who comes to the motion picture home has got to be in the entertainment business.
Right.
And so many can't be there. And might I just say, I am so sorry for that, because I've had experience with other places, and it is the kindest, most generous way for people to spend the end of their life at the motion picture home. Let's just talk about this as a time in our life, not the motion picture home, because not everybody can get in there.
Right.
So Jessica, I'm in, let's say, I've got my father in, and he's moving in a month, and I come to you and I say, what paperwork do you need? Now, I know I had to get the paperwork first, but let's just say I didn't yet.
Yeah.
And you guys, you have to get the paperwork ready before you move in.
Yes.
So that's a good thing to know.
Yes. So, I mean, I think, I can go down the checklist, but, very important pieces of paper to have in place would be a power of attorney for health, right? So Bob talked about the 5 wishes. You have somebody designated to make health decisions on your behalf in the event that you can no longer make them. So that's a power of attorney for healthcare.
Okay.
And what's important to say about that document is not only do you have to have a person designated, but make sure that that person who's designated, you've had a conversation with. If it's you, the child, then you, the child, need to understand what their wishes are.
Correct.
And do you, the child, feel comfortable carrying out those wishes on their behalf? Because that too can be very difficult in terms of whatever, their parents may have decided.
Right.
So power of attorney for health is important. Power of attorney for finances. That's another important piece to have. Now, this gets a little tricky because there are generic power of attorney for finances, and then there's the real world in terms of banking. Right. So I could have my child listed as my power of attorney for finances, and I take that over, or my child takes that over, and they go to Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo said, well, that's all fine and good, but that's not our power of attorney. So what I always tell families is if your adult child who you've designated as your power of attorney can get on your bank accounts with you, it's super helpful.
Yeah.
Because then they can seamlessly take over those finances.
So true. So I've seen people struggle with that. That is so important.
Yeah.
It's super important.
Yeah. And banks experience a really high level of potential fraud, especially these days with, family members, friends, whatever, showing up at the bank and saying, I'm so-and-so's, whatever,
Yeah.
with that. So they are just, rightfully so, extra cautious about this. So
I really encourage people to get on accounts with their parents. Now, if for some reason they can't do that or whatever, then I really encourage people to call the individual banks and see if there are the individual power of attorney forms that can be filled out. And I would do that for most accounts that people have.
And if it's a problem, can't you just go to your bank and have your mom or dad move their finances to your bank and do it that way?
Absolutely.
That seems like right?
Your name needs to be on that account.
Right.
Yeah. Do that.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I have a mother-in-law who lives in Sarasota. We've not been able to see her, Florida. We've not been able to see her for a year and a half or 2 years. Her health is declining. Neither my wife or any of her siblings are on her bank account. Because it just didn't
Do they not know you and what you do for a living?
Like I said,
there's knowing and doing.
Yeah, and like I said, everyone's parent is different. My mother-in-law has just been completely resistant. Like, I can do this myself. I don't need anyone's help. Blah blah blah. You're taking away the last bit of personal activity I have in my life. I won't do it. She's now declining, and the bank in Sarasota has told us, you need to be here personally to get your name on the account. And until then, we can't do it.
And during a pandemic, it makes it even more difficult.
Who knew we were going to have a pandemic and Florida would be, the
hotbed
of activity.
Hotbed of activity.
Yeah, so right back to your point, it's never too early because you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the more proactive you can be about all of this stuff, like rewind from moving into any facility, the more proactive you can be, the earlier you can do it, the better. So for instance, to give a personal example, I was back east this summer with my parents who are in their 70s, and I gave them this talk that we are having right now.
Was it difficult for you? I mean, when you this is what you do for a living, was it hard? Was it?
No, it wasn't hard.
Okay, good.
I liked it. I mean, my parents are pretty easy to deal with.
Okay, good.
And I'm the oldest child, so they tend to listen to me more than my sister, which is always a nice thing. But,
Anyway.
Yeah, it's all in the approach, right? And so my dad was telling me about a friend of his, and I said, that's a really good example of, again, it doesn't have to be me on the account. It can be Elena. That's my sister's name. But one of us should be on the account with you guys. And the same true, honestly, is if they have homes, if they're okay with that.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So they're going to, I think, hopefully move in that direction. But, they live on their own. They're independent. But again, they're 70 and who knows? Like Bob said, what's going to happen the next day. So.
Yes. And putting them on the house, too, which is an interesting idea because it's just crazy. You could lose it you could lose it.
Yeah. And now you start getting into both the bank account and the house are hot button items for parents. It's like, oh, I get it. I'm going to wake up one morning and you're going to own my house and kick me. You're going to get back at me for that time when you were 11 years old and I, put you in your room for a week for, smoking pot with your friends.
But there are those psychos who do that to their parents. So
absolutely,
there are.
I mean, that's people, where the fine balance is. It really is.
And people who live in places like this hear, all kinds of horror stories. But I mean, anyone who's that age, who socializes, someone's got a story to tell about some awful kid who did something.
Yeah.
I want to go back a second though to something that Jess said and just add one piece to it. So you should have that power of attorney. Mm-hmm. You should make sure that power of attorney is recorded wherever your parent is in whoever they get their health care from, that it's in their electronic health record.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just in the event you're somewhere away, something happens to your parent, they can't get in touch with you, or they do get in touch with you and you say, I've got this thing.
My safe deposit box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say, we need to know, within an hour whether we're going to operate on mom or pull the plug. Right. You want it in the health record. They can just look it up. And
the digital health record is all new. So this is very new advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
it's another good point.
Yeah. By the way, this is not, again, I'm going to keep on coming back. This is not just mom and dad. This is you. If you've got ideas about how you want to be treated, you've done 5 questions, whatever, you need to make sure that it's in your health record as well. It's for your kids as well. If your kids are over
anybody 18 and over,
you don't want to get a call, God forbid your child was in a car accident, blah, blah, blah. And you say, oh, she'd want X. And they say,
That's right. She's not saying it and she's an adult. You can't tell us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I had to do that when the kids went to college. But I'm not sure it's digital. So I should change that. So that's another thing. And I didn't even think about that whole door opening. But that's a good, addition to all of this.
So we have the power of attorney for health, which we talked about. And that could be a 5 wishes, which Bob has referenced. 5 wishes is a booklet that we order from a certain website. You can Google it and see if you want to order it for yourself. Basically what it is it's a booklet. It guides you through with different questions and just gets you thinking about different things as it relates to your health.
Great.
If in the event that you weren't able to make your own decisions.
Your geriatric health.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
NIKKI5wishes.org. For your listeners.
I appreciate you going over there and finding out. Thank you.
The only other thing that I think is important to reference, and again, not always a fun topic to talk about, is what we call here at Motion Picture a funeral plan. Mm-hmm. So a plan for what you would like done upon your death. Yeah. So that would be things like, do you wish to be cremated or buried? Do you want ashes out at sea? However you want that done.
Sure.
And then if you have something already set up, so a pre-need, do you have a plot or a family plot? And then do you, the child, know what your parents' wishes are for that? And do you know if they've bought something where that
if it's
is
paid for or not, or you
Yeah.
have to start saving money for it because it's expensive,
Yeah, it is.
unbelievably expensive.
Yeah.
And I think that shocks people all the time.
Yeah. Nikki, the other thing I would say is you yourselves, all of us and our parents, we should make sure that we know, like, that mom and dad have all of the information about bank accounts, stock accounts, life insurance, funeral stuff, that it's all like in a binder.
One place.
Or something, one place somewhere, so that there's not a mad scramble, at a time when you don't want to be mad scrambling.
Right, when you don't have the time for that.
Yeah.
And even when you do have the time for that, that's just not good.
Yeah.
And they can't remember where they put it. That's a whole nother thing. So find out early also where the binder is, or make 2 copies of it so you have one.
Or you get a contact list for the insurance agent and the stockbroker and whatever it is. You just need to have all that information at a fingertip because you just don't know when you're going to need it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that this isn't just a normal part of a familial conversation, but it's so not. And when that time comes, it's a terrible time to start wondering what you don't know.
Yeah.
Why don't they teach this in high school?
There are a lot of things they should be teaching in high school that they don't. And I'll add one more thing to that list is passwords.
Oh my God, right? And now there's not just one password for everything, and every password, I don't know any of my passwords.
Yeah.
They're crazy. Yeah, that's a thing you need to know where their list of passwords are and what they're for.
Yeah.
It should probably be in that binder or whatever
it should be in that binder.
Keep it in. Yeah.
It should be in that binder as well.
An example is, we heard this, just probably 8 or 9 years ago, youngish woman, she was in her 40s, I think. Yeah. She married. She and her husband are like 2/3 of the way through finalizing their estate plan. She takes her 2 young kids to a birthday party. He goes out on a motorcycle thing with the friends, and she gets the call. He's in the hospital. He passes away like the next day, motorcycle accident. She didn't have any of his passwords. She literally couldn't reach out to his friends to say, he died, because she didn't know how to
open his phone.
She couldn't open his phone, and she had no idea how to get in touch with any of them.
Yeah.
Okay, this is depressing.
It's tragic. I mean, but it's a really good point, because I think another thing, sorry, I hope this isn't like going every which way, but another
these are the things I'm looking for. So
another thing to sort of piggyback on that with is, in my experience, at least with sort of the generation that we work with here and now that are living at Motion Picture, so the average age is what, 84?
87.
87, okay. It was a generation where typically the men did all of the finances. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our female clients who are actually still living in the home, who have relied on their husbands to do the finances, have no clue whatsoever.
Right.
Not even just about passwords, but like
nothing.
What bills to pay.
How much money
Where do they bank?
Yeah,
How much money is there? How do I get my money?
Right.
And so again, if those are your parents, which I don't mean to stereotype, but might be pretty typical for the generation of our parents, that if the spouse isn't going to understand it,
the kid has
then the child does.
Yeah.
Because that can be extremely shocking to a surviving spouse who's never had to deal with that before.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yes, in the case, I'll go back to the case of my mother-in-law. My father-in-law passed away, and they'd been living in this place for 10 or 12 years. She didn't know how to turn the oven on.
Okay, well, that's rare for the women, but still, so the opposite is true. Maybe you pay the bills, but you don't cook.
Yeah, in her case, neither, but
Bob, what did she do?
Somebody was spoiled.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that she didn't cook, but I think she said, Gil, turn the oven on to 350, and he did that. It was, a more modern oven than she was used to, and she didn't know how to do it.
Well, I don't know how to turn on my television.
There we
I
go.
have no idea how to turn on my
That's
TV.
the kids' job.
That's
these
that's
days.
what 12-year-olds are for.
Yeah, exactly.
Nikki, I'm going to go back to the passwords for 1 second and make a suggestion to everyone
please.
who is listening to go online. There are probably 10 really good password managers. So it's, a password. You only have to remember one password, and it will have all of your other passwords on it. Passwords are dynamic. We change our passwords all the time. We get hacked and we decide we need, something happens. And so even if you just make a little binder with your passwords,
It could be out of date in a
it
week.
could be out of date, but the password manager will keep them all pretty current.
And the password managers can't be hacked?
No, they're pretty good.
I like
So
that
there's-
idea.
There's Dashlane, there's OnePass, there's NordPass.
Okay.
There are a bunch of them that are really simple to set up. And
do you have that set up, Bob?
I do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you, Jessica?
No,
Yeah, me neither.
I'm the old-fashioned have it written down on a piece of paper, but I do take a picture of it with my phone.
That when someone steals your phone, well, then you're screwed.
Yeah.
It doesn't say what the paper is. It's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
Oh, I
But,
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do that when we hang up, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Just for my own edification, not for anybody else's. Okay, so, wow. As you guys keep pointing out, everything is available on the web. So let's talk about the things that don't show up everywhere. How aging it is for people our age to do this. God, I remember when my mom died, I swear to you guys, I woke up the next day and the front of my hair was white. Like, it just turned white. And that happens. It is overwhelming. It is all-consuming. And how do you tell people? Do people ever come to you, Jessica, and just say, I don't know what to do. I can't do this anymore.
Great recovery, Nikki, from your hair turning white.
I know, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, fabulous. Good recovery.
So, Jessica, do people come to you, or have you heard stories about people who, and I'm not just talking about people whose parents are in their homes.
Yeah.
Even when you're lucky enough to have somebody at a place like yours, I still worried about my dad 24/7. So, because you never know who's doing what, and if when they took their own pills because they insist on it, they dropped one on the
Right.
carpet and they didn't get it. You just don't. You can't. You want to help, but again, you can't control everything anyway.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head right there. Yes, people do that all the time. Like, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or is there something else I should be doing, or I'm still concerned about them. And so I like to sort of stop them in their tracks, of this sort of panic that they're having, and ask them, what other things do you think you should be doing? And it's like, well, I've done X, Y, Z, nothing. And so it's like, do you feel like they're safe? Do you feel like your parents are safe? Yeah, I feel like my parents are safe. But mom calls me because she's stressed all the time. Well, probably because mom just wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
And mom wants a way to connect to her daughter. And so your job at that point is just to listen to mom. It's not always about trying to fix it, but it's
You don't
about
have to try to be somebody's husband.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes our job is just to be the receptacle of sort of all of their, nervousness and anxiety.
Yeah.
And just let them know that you're there to support them.
Right.
And if there is something real that they need assistance with, then of course you're going to help them with that.
Right.
But I do think it's okay just to sort of, sit back and say, have I done everything I think I can do? And if the answer to that is yes, then just sort of be with them.
Try to be with that.
Yeah, try
So-
to be with them.
When we find a place for our parents, or when we're looking for a place for our parents, I remember, gosh, I probably looked at 3 or 4 of them before I found my father's place while we were on the waiting list for the motion picture home. The first one I walked into smelled like poop. like the minute you walked in the room. And I was like, yep, not staying here. And somebody, it came highly recommended. They were like, it stinks a little, but yeah, no. Others, I could see that there was no interaction between the staff and the people, you know? And what are the really important things to look for when you're visiting these homes to help your parents have a lovely experience there?
I think really one of the most important things is the relationship between the staff and the residents. Yeah. You know, just like you said, when you walk in, you know, are people interacting with the residents? Are I mean, we're in a pandemic, but, you know, are the residents engaged in activities? Do the residents look happy? You know, or are they, you know, doing things that seem to bring them joy? Does the staff look happy? You know, like, do they seem like they enjoy their job? You're going to know, honestly, you're going to know the minute you walk in if a place feels good. It's almost like when I was looking for daycare for my kids, you walk into a place and you see the interaction between staff and the kids and you know, okay, this is a place where I could see my child being. It's the same for, you know, if you have to place your parents somewhere.
For anybody you love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember walking into a place, I don't remember, well, I do remember, I'm not going to say the name of it, and literally there were a few people just like in their wheelchairs facing the wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Big no-no.
Yeah.
Big no-no.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, the staff first and foremost, the cleanliness. You want to taste the food for sure.
Food's important.
And you want your parents to taste the food.
Right.
I would look at sort of like what activities do they have on the calendar? Is it a good mix of activities? You know, does it suit sort of a range of people's interests? Do people's like wheelchairs look, you know, okay? Do the beds look okay? Those kinds of things.
And also, depending on how many residents are on each floor of wherever you are there enough nurses per floor?
Yeah, so you always want to ask about ratios, staffing ratios.
I think you also want to understand how they communicate with you as the caregiver in charge. You know, will you never hear from them? Will you get do they return calls within a certain period of time? Are they available by email? You know, this is especially important if your parents aren't local.
Right.
You want to feel like you've got a pulse on what's going on, and you want to feel like
connected.
Yeah. Dad mentioned to me this morning that X, Y, and Z happened. How do I get in touch with someone to confirm whether or not that's the case?
Right.
And who is that person? And if it's the weekend, who's that person?
Who's that person on the weekend?
On the weekend, and you know, or at night, or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I remember I got a phone call once that my father had fallen, and he's fine. You know, we took him to the doctor. He's fine, but he fell. So I waited like a day, and my dad never said a word about it. You know, so then I call my dad. You know, I call him like 15 times within that day and the next, and finally I'm like, "Hey, have you got anything to tell me?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Are you sure, Dad?" He's like, "Yeah, I got," and I'm like, "Yeah, I think you do. Nancy called me, told me you fell." And he was like, "Oh my God, it was nothing." So I was like, "Hey, I'm around the corner. I'm gonna come by." And Dad's like, "Can we go for coffee?" I said, "Sure." I pull up. I'm sure you remember this, you guys. He had the biggest shiner. And I was like, "Did you? What? You weren't even gonna mention that?" So thank God somebody called me and told me.
Yeah.
Because I would have been, number one, I would have been concerned, but number two, I would have been mad if somebody hadn't.
Yeah.
To me, the overarching thing that you should be thinking about for your parent, which is what matters most to them in the remaining years they have left, number one. And number two, and I'll get to this, hold on. There is a number two. Well, I'll come back to that number two when I think of it. But, you know, what matters most to them.
What's going to bring them the most happiness?
Yeah, what's going to be, because my point was going to be, at some point, it isn't about the number of years that we're going to have our parents around. It's what the quality of life and enjoyment and satisfaction they have in the years they have left.
Yeah.
there's someone focused on socialization of new residents. My mother-in-law in the place that she was living struggled for the first 3 months because all these places are like high school.
Yeah.
Right. So
They've
you
got
get
their
there
cliques.
and they're cliques.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, everyone's got their clique in the dining room and I feel awkward. How do I integrate into that? So what do they do about that kind of social? It can be, it can be like getting a shitty roommate when you go to college.
It is exactly like that.
It can destroy your whole, you can say this school sucks because.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I remember my father, and there were fights with people in the dining room about where certain people sat, and people giving them the stink eye when you sat somewhere else. And
Right, yeah.
I remember my dad trying to make everybody happy and switching tables in the beginning. And then I also remember him at some point wanting to get out of the table he was in. Yeah. And it is exactly like high school. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's full circle. I say it all the time. It's full circle. But I think, one thing that Bob brought up, which I also think is important, and maybe goes back to what we had started talking about in the beginning in terms of the conversation that you have with your parents, is having the conversation with them as early as possible about where do they want to age in place? Yeah. And can they afford whatever their wish is? Is that a practical wish? So that they can be the captains of their ship. So if it's at home,
right,
is home safe enough for them to do that? And can you afford to stay home?
And can you afford to put in the guardrails and the bath things and
Or if it is a placement, okay, like, much to our discussion right now, what do you want that place to look like? What would you look for in a place if you needed to be placed?
So what happens if your parents choose either one, but they're running out of money and you have your college savings account for your kids and your retirement? So I've read up, and I got my father his veterans pension.
Good. Yep.
And I never knew. First of all, I knew he was in the Navy, but I didn't know there was a pension, and neither did he.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people don't.
that was a huge thing. So what are your choices to get help for your parents? Are there stipends available for end of life care?
So that's a hard question. So stipends for end of life care. I mean, hospice is a Medicare paid benefit, which can, provide end of life care to someone wherever they may be, home or in a facility, as long as it's a hospice approved facility. But caregiving outside of sort of what's paid through for insurance can be expensive.
Is.
It's
very expensive.
But, if they are a veteran, there is that benefit. Depending upon their financial situation, there's Medi-Cal, but that is also, they have to meet certain financial criteria. But there is in-home supportive services through Medi-Cal if you qualify for that. But I think sadly in our country, care for people as they age is financially is a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
And I think something many people struggle with.
And Jess, who would someone go to kind of explore all of those things? Are there like care managers, case managers?
Yeah. So there's like geriatric care managers that you can, consult with.
Okay, so there is a place to go to find out what might be available to your parents and you to make sure that you can afford to take care of them.
Yeah, and then there's also a website called Benefits Checkup. Where you can go in for your parents, and it takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and you have to plug in all of their financial information, and including like where they have veteran. And that too will spit out a report in terms of what they might be eligible for in terms of access through insurance, like Medicare or Medi-Cal.
Yeah.
Another thing that they should either teach you in high school or when you get your first job, HR should tell you to have these things in place.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I mean, again, I'm going to talk to the children of these aging parents,
Please.
Us.
Yeah, that's what we're talking to.
There's long-term care insurance
Right.
Yeah.
available. For your parents, it's too late. Maybe they were smart enough to have, to
Buy it early.
Buy it early. It's cheaper the younger you are.
Sure.
Personally, I think it's a good investment to make.
Yeah.
There are these hybrid long-term care policies that are life insurance policies as well. So if you never use the long-term care, you get the full benefit
At the
in
end of
life insurance. If you use some of it, but not all of it, then the remainder is life insurance. But, it's certainly worth talking to your insurance person to find out about that, because we've got a bunch of residents on our campus who wouldn't be here without their long-term care policies.
Right. Okay, so are we missing anything? We talked about you need to know everything about their medical. You want to know what medications they're on. You want to know who their doctors are. You want to have a relationship with all those people to take care of your parents. I mean, there's so much. We could go on for days. But both of you are in the position that we're talking to people about. So what's the best advice about managing the stress of it? Or how do you do it that works well for you? Jessica, even though, your parents are easier, the worry, you see people go through stuff every day. You hear horror stories every day. None of us are positively going to avoid all of that just because we think we know our family so well. There's no guarantee of that. Mm-hmm. So the stress of this whole thing, what's your best advice, both of you, for everything you've seen happen and what you guys are going through now? What do you say to people who, I don't know, taking care of ourselves during this and how to deal with all of this scary thing?
So I would say to the person, you first have to make sure your gas tank is filled, right? So you have to take care of yourself first, because you are no good to anybody if you're completely defeated and depleted. Mm-hmm. So your own self-care, honestly, is first and foremost. And then I would say, whatever seems completely overwhelming, honestly, break it up into tiny chunks. Do small steps and just start with one task and take it from there. Because you're going to be more successful by breaking it up rather than trying to take it on all at once.
Yeah, the whole picture is too big.
Yeah, it's way too big. And so starting with something that you can get done pretty easily, starting with that, because then you're going to feel successful. Your parents are probably going to feel good, and it's at least one thing done.
So baby steps.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and keep a list and cross off what you've done so you know.
Yeah.
And Bob?
Well, I would agree with Jess. I mean, there's a reason when we get onto airplanes and we get instructions before the flight takes off, they say, make sure your oxygen mask is on before you take care of your children. So that's just basic survival is, the full tank or the oxygen mask or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I think Jess and I both have seen people who sometimes their spouses, partners, or kids who just drag themselves and down and wear themselves out, trying to provide care and stressing out and all of those things. And, that's not it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for the person you're giving care to.
And then they're worrying about you.
And they're worrying about you. And, sometimes that person winds up dying before the sick person dies because they've just
stress them
out, or they try to, they're lifting them and moving them and just doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing because they think they're doing good. So that is a great piece of advice. Breaking it into pieces, I think, is a great piece of advice.
And the other question I have for you is, I remember when I first got there, I was talking to Leslie. short-haired woman in the, I don't remember her last name. She was hilarious. And she was explaining to me, as I had heard from other places, the amount of STDs that happen in retirement. Can we talk about that for a second? That's a real thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about that, because I was shocked with my dad.
Yeah.
None of us like to think about our parents having sex. Our kids don't like to think about us having sex, but I don't
want to think about my kids having sex either.
I'll put that out
there. But for some people that goes on for a long time, and it's important to them, and it's an important and healthy way for people to commune with each other. So there is sleeping. It's like high school. They're sleeping around. And it's not always
protected.
done. It's not always done in the most, I mean, we've got pregnancies. No, just kidding.
You can imagine.
There's so. Yeah.
I think there are people who forget they have something.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are people who are just like, oh, I'm not going to get pregnant. Go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And things spread around. I remember that was hilarious. And I'm going to tell you this. One time during the flu shutdowns, my father and his girlfriend were in their room together, in my father's room together. And they were both talking like this because they were sick, but they were both sick, so it was okay. And it was on speaker. And we were talking about what their days were like and how much they miss their friends and stuff. And I was driving. So when we hung up, I just figured my dad would hang up the phone and my phone would disconnect. No, he didn't hang up until he said the dirtiest thing to his girlfriend about what he was going to do to her when he felt better. And it was like, I can't wait till I feel better. And I was like, oh my God. And I called my brother.
I didn't hear that.
Oh my God, I called my brother. He was like, I don't know what's grosser, the idea that you heard Dad say it or that I heard you say it. It's all disgusting. So there's just that little end of the STD story. Okay, and also, I asked you guys what your advice would be. And so as a woman who's done it both times already, I want to add this. You guys are much stronger than you think you are. And there's so much fear going into this. Fear of making a mistake, fear of losing your parents, fear of somebody doing something to your parents, that we forget that when grown-ups need to be brave, we're pretty capable.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right? And your bravery and your abilities and your strength really show up when you're pushed. Mm-hmm. So when you guys are thinking you can't do this, find somebody who reminds you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's your kid, even though you think they don't really.
Yeah.
When I cried to my kids was when I got the best support.
Yeah.
And just remember what you're made of, because a lot of us grew up so afraid of this all of our lives. But if you love your parent, you are so capable of stepping up and doing this, you guys. And it's terrifying, but information is out there. This is just a little bit of it. But people like Bob and people like Jessica are everywhere in the world. And you can find them. You can Google, a support group of social workers or something. And the help is out there. And I don't know, if you really need help and you don't know who to turn to, call the motion picture home and ask them who to call, and somebody will advise you on who to call.
I was going to say,
for sure.
Get referrals for sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything in closing you guys want to add to that?
No, Nikki, I mean, I think you point out something really beautiful, which is this is a stressful, complex, emotional time in your life, and you do need to find some girlfriend, boyfriend, support group, social worker, someone to share your journey with. Mm-hmm. Because again, if you just try to do it all yourself, process it yourself, you're just going to pull yourself down. You need to have an outlet for all of this, because as brave and as strong as any of us are, it will tear you down after a while. And I think the other thing that I would add to all of this is you need to focus on what's best for your parent and not what's best for you.
And I think as kids, you just so don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
That we sometimes lose perspective of that.
Right.
And we do everything in our power to keep them alive or whatever it might be, when that might not be in alignment with what their wishes are. I think what Bob's saying is extremely important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation, right? Is understanding what their wishes are, having conversations about their wishes and honoring those wishes. And I'm not going to lie, it's going to be hard. But you're doing the most loving thing for them, walking this journey with them and being their voice when they can no longer be that voice. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And Nikki, it's also important to me to, and Jessica said this from the beginning in terms of being the captain of the ship, it's important for them and important for you to keep them captain of the ship for as long as possible.
Right.
And don't get frustrated and push them out of the way before, prematurely, because it's really debilitating. And even if you are sort of taking over, it's just critical to include them in the decisions. There's nothing worse than them thinking, Nikki went off and decided X, Y, and Z for me, and now I'm stuck with it.
Just so that, like you said, they don't feel like they're being robbed, because when they do, they just lay down and die.
Well, they have to have purpose still too.
Yeah.
And it was funny when I was back east. My mom was like telling me what to do, and it was like the silliest thing that she was telling me to do. And I was like furiously texting my sister, like, I'm 47 years old and she still has to tell me to do this. And she said to me the most enlightening thing. She said, Jess, she only knows how to be your parent.
That's right.
And so they're always only going to know how to be your parent. Yeah. And so allow that relationship to continue for as long as you can. Let them be your parent. And just walk along with them.
Even though you've realized that you've become their parent.
Yeah.
It is a weird thing, you guys.
It is a weird thing.
And I'm going to throw one more thing in there,
Please.
Nikki. We live in a society, in a world where spirituality for a lot of people has fallen to the wayside, right? Our parents don't go to temple anymore or church anymore or whatever. But they're entering a time of their lives where spirituality can be critically important and reborn. And they want to, come to peace with a lot of things. So one of the things I would look at, as you start making decisions about where to place them is that kind of spiritual guidance, supervision, conversation available. We are incredibly blessed at Lucian Picture to have our palliative care chaplain, Arthur Rosenberg, Rabbi Arthur Rosenberg, and Dina Cooperstock, our chaplain. And, they have conversations with Catholics and Episcopalians and Jewish people. It doesn't matter what the religion is.
And atheists like my father.
And atheists. But some of those conversations are just so important to have as they get older and, realize they're going to pass away. And, what does that mean to them in terms of their spiritual life? So that really should be a focus. And it's one that, for better or worse, a lot of us have just lost sight of. I want to highlight that.
I think that happens throughout life, because life comes with so many disappointments that, people who might have followed a certain religion all their life and realized, wait a minute. I mean, it's not that religion doesn't work, but something about it that was supposed to guarantee something didn't work so well. So you know what? Forget it.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, my father used to call himself an atheist. And I remember Arthur said to him one day, we were talking, and my father said, well, please God. And Arthur was like, pardon me? And my father started to mention things, say things like that where he never said it before. And Arthur was like, it seems to me that something is shifting in you, David.
Yeah.
And it did. And I don't know that he believed in it or thought he was going to the pearly gates or what, but something shifted. And of course it does when you're looking back and don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So on that note, don't wait till it's too long, you guys. It's an uncomfortable conversation, which is why I wanted to do this. Conversations matter, and this one is on the top of the list. So if you're over 18, think about it.
Yeah.
And if you're 50, it's probably getting late to do it. So time
to do it.
Get going.
Yeah.
I can't thank you guys enough. And maybe if there's any questions out there, I'll call you back and ask if we can talk about some more, if you would be so kind.
Sure.
I am grateful for your time. I am grateful for what you guys did for my father. And
Absolutely.
all right, everybody, we can do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Nikki, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica.